Good evening again, folks. All right, so apparently I have to explain a few things, and this is not for the people that already know what I'm talking about. This is for the lay people who have never really worked in, any sort of crime detection, criminal investigation, anything like that. This is for you guys. It was pointed out to me on an earlier video that there's no blood splatter or spatter in Teresa Halbach's car. And that's actually erroneous. That's a misstatement. The actual technical terminology that is used with regards to blood evidence is spatter. That's why Dexter's a blood spatter analyst. Okay, that's his title. There's a reason for that. That's what they're called. And actually, not only that, but I think she meant that there was no, projectile blood, when in reality there actually is. There was what we call impact stains, and that is from when you, yes, I'm using a pen, when you stab and you pull back, a stream of blood is going to be pulled out with the blade, and it's going to fly everywhere, and it's going to hit a wall or, whatever surface is near it. It's the same thing with a bullet, folks. When the bullet enters into the flesh, obviously projectiles of blood are going to fly out of that wound and land on anything that's nearby. It's the same thing with blunt force trauma. You hit, and that hit is going to cause blood to spurt out and land anywhere. Not to mention, when you pull the object back, you're going to be pulling some blood with it, and that's what's called impact spatter. Blood smearage or transfer stains. That's considered blood spatter simply because it is blood evidence. So I wanted to sort of go through some of the terminology because you'll hear me get really technical, and I didn't want to confuse anyone. I'm sorry about all the blinking, folks. Apparently I got a piece of wood in my eye when I was feeding my firebox. Wow, if I were to say that in a really sexy voice, I'm gonna put some wood into my wood box. I have a dirty mind, folks. I don't know if you've paid attention. Anyways, so I wanted to sort of go through some of the terminology and, sort of explain a few things. That way, as we move through the evidence, you'll understand what I'm talking about. You'll hear me differentiate between statement and testimony. A statement is any time that you talk to police. Whether it's you telling them what happened and they're writing it down and then they, print out a copy and you sign it. Or sometimes the police will give you a form and you fill it out and then you write down what happened and then you sign it. Either way around it, that's considered a statement. An affidavit is kind of like a statement but slightly more official. It's basically the finalized statement of what you told police, filling in any missing details, anything like that. And then you've got, and that's actually what is published out to the attorneys as the official record. Then you've got testimony, which is what you say on the stand. When you're sitting in the witness box and they're questioning you, that's your testimony. You will hear me talk about swabbing. There are a few different ways of swabbing, and, there's a few different things that they're looking for there. But the vast majority of the time when you are swabbing for evidence, you will take a Q-tip, and you will drip distilled water onto it to be able to pick up any DNA that's around there, and then you'll swab the stain or the area. If they feel like there might be DNA in a certain area, they'll put the distilled water and then they'll swipe it. There is a chemical compound. I'm not entirely 100% sure what it's called. It's been a few years. That if you then take that that swab and drip it on there. If it's human blood or if blood had ever made contact with that surface, it'll turn the swab bright pink. And that actually is still testable. It's still testable DNA. It takes a long time to be able to replicate the strands enough, but it can be done. Then I know a lot of you have seen on crime shows where they're collecting evidence and they put it in a plastic bag. That's actually erroneous because plastic can smear fingerprints. They use paper bags. And the thing is I've seen people talking about the evidence box with Steven Avery's blood, and they had to cut it to get into the box so that they could test his DNA when he got out in 2005. Yeah, they did. And if you pay attention to that box, you'll see that there's actually about 2 or 3 layers of that evidence tape, because every time you access that evidence, you then have to reseal it with a brand new strip of evidence tape. So just because the seal was broken and his blood was tested to exonerate him in 2005, or I'm sorry, in 2003, whenever it was that he got exonerated, doesn't mean that the seal would have stayed broken. Somebody would have sealed that up. The lab tech would have properly sealed that up with evidence tape. You will hear me talk a lot about the warrant and the return of warrant. In order to obtain a warrant, you have to have probable cause. And probable cause means that you have to have some kind of patent belief, provable belief that the crime that you believe was committed was committed. For example, they were not able to get a warrant for the salvage yard until the car was found on it. Up until then, they had to rely completely on the Avery saying, fine, you can come search the property. There is something that does deviate from the need for warrant, and that is called direct line of sight. Direct line of sight is, say a cop pulls you over, and you roll down the window and he smells marijuana. He can then search your car without a warrant. It's the same thing even if he doesn't smell marijuana, but he sees a weed pipe sitting in your console. That's direct line of sight. So that means that he can search your car without a warrant. You'll hear me use a lot of technical terms. You'll hear me talk about ballistics. Ballistics is anything that has to do with guns or projectiles. You'll hear me talk about blunt force trauma. That is any time that you use an instrument or your fists to impact. Blunt force. You will hear me talk a lot about, if I've said it before, I'll say it again. Sweat DNA, this whole theory that Kratz has about sweat DNA, there's no such thing, people. Sweat itself does not have DNA. Sweat can contain DNA only one way, if it's mixed with another bodily fluid or epithelial cells from the skin. And epithelials are skin cells. So, I will be using a lot of technical terms, and I try to keep in mind that not everybody understands what I'm saying. So I do try to explain as I go along, but sometimes I get caught up in the moment. So I apologize if I've confused anyone, but I did just want to go through and explain these things. I will be the first to admit I am not a complete expert when it comes to law enforcement, but I know quite a bit. So, if there's law enforcement watching this and, you caught me with an inconsistency or whatever, or you have something to add to this, any terminology or, any processes. And, folks, I'm actually going to do a video about the breakdown of how a homicide detective or a homicide investigation is supposed to go in the next video. But if you guys have anything to say, any fellow law enforcement, anybody that works with the law, if you have anything to add to this, please do. I welcome all contributions. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next video.